Hello. I've been getting a lot of questions about the Beirut explosion, or the explosion in Beirut that happened yesterday. Normally, I would write a blog post or a thread somewhere or put some junk in social media or whatever about this type of thing because very few people really care to hear what an assessor would actually have to say about it. Not like video worthy type stuff. In my view, I find that not many people actually care. But I want to practice editing a little bit because I'm terrible at that. So that's really what this is. So I'll ramble a bit and then I'll put an image or two into it and we'll see what happens. The As soon as that explosion happened and word started getting around, immediately there's conspiracy theorists and everybody's got a model of the world, and then they've got an event that doesn't fit that model, and so they're trying to figure out how that fits in some way. So you reach for the I guess the thought patterns that are familiar to you, and of course one of them is Lebanon. So of course enemy action of some sort, but what enemy? That's undefined. Why? Motive is totally undefined. And we'll walk through a little bit of this, and we'll find that motive is this huge gap that we have that makes it very hard to interpret at the moment. Knowing what we know now, again, it's totally dependent on a lack of information. But knowing what we know right now, it is very hard to interpret that event as enemy action. There is a storage log, actually seizure and storage, like impounding seizure log of 2,700 tons. That's with a capital T. That's metric tons. This is a lot of stuff of ammonium nitrate, ANFO. It's an explosive that it's got a very low RE factor, which means it explodes slowly. C4 explodes like more than twice as fast as ANFO does. TNT explodes about twice as fast as ANFO does. It's a very slow explosive. It is an explosive. It's a little bit faster than gunpowder, but not, it's not that quick. So it's a pusher. It's not a cracker. So if I was going to try to shatter steel or direct a plasma stream in a certain spot, I would be using C4 or TNT or something with a higher RE factor to get that snap. If you're trying to push a bunch of dirt out of the way, or shove rocks apart or something like that, then you use something like ammonium nitrate or dynamite or one of those lower RE factor type explosives. So there's 2,700 tons of this stuff that's in a warehouse in Lebanon on the docks, stored next to several tons of fireworks. Now, people would ask, why would there be fireworks next to this? And so that's unsafe. Well, of course it's unsafe. It's unsafe to store 2,700 tons of this stuff altogether anywhere. You have to have siloing so you can, like if you have a bunch of it here, you don't put a bunch of it right next to it. You have to have separation between the charges, so if this one goes off, it might blow this one apart, but it won't make it blow up. So you won't get a full chain going. That's a safety thing, though, and if you go the places I've been in the Middle East, which is almost everywhere there is you can go in the Middle East, there's not, they're not like safety number one. That doesn't exist. Which you'll see leaking pipes next to transformers with wires going everywhere, and kids literally playing in the leaked water right next to it, and nobody even thinks that that's unusual. That's the backside of apartment buildings in the Middle East. If you go on the front side, it might look nice, and a lot of people actually have quite a nice home interior, but outside the wire work is terrifying. There's holes in the street. Imagine being in a construction site that never finished, and it will never finish. It's an eternal construction site where things that were just built will be destroyed, and you'll start building something again, all within the site, with kids running around playing and gasoline fires just kind of randomly going off. That's like safety in the Middle East. So it's remarkable that more people don't get hurt than do just walking down the street in some places. That's Israel aside. Israel actually kind of has construction standards, but most of the Middle East is very, we used to say, cheap nice. When you see a building from a long way away, it looks nice. You go up and it's just there's gaps between the tile and there's rebar sticking out, and sometimes there's no rebar. It's just chicken wire. That's why when like a minor earthquake will happen someplace like Turkey and it kills like 60,000 people overnight, but the earthquake was only like a magnitude 3 or 4, which would just be blown off most places. But in the Middle East, that's going to cause several apartment complex floors to pancake, boom, 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 on top of each other. Like Twin Towers collapse syndrome, just from a little bit of shaking. And that's because there's no rebar in the structure. There's supposed to be. It was on the contract. It was in the blueprint. But somebody sold that rebar off somewhere, replaced it with chicken wire, and now you don't really have a strong building at all. That is a common thing to see. So in that context, the boneheaded mistake of storing 2,700 tons of ANFO in a single warehouse next to a place that's going to have a bunch of fireworks in it, that's par for the course. So that is not actually unrealistic. So a lot of people will look at that and they'll say, well, that's unrealistic. This must be enemy action because that doesn't make sense. No, that's not true. This completely makes sense that there would be that storage problem there, that unsafe storage problem there. Second part of it is, well, ANFO is hard to set off because it is hard to set off. You actually can't just use a detonator or a blasting cap. You have to have a kicker charge. A kicker charge is something strong with a higher RE factor than the ANFO. So something that burns faster than the ANFO to give it a very sharp shock, because you need a lot of pressure and heat together to set it off. So you need a stick of Semtex or C4 or TNT or something like that to get it to go. If you watch the long video of the fireworks, I say the long video, there's several long videos of the event that happened. People got on their phones and started filming it, once the fireworks are going off. Most fireworks are gunpowder or gunpowder-ish based. They're not munitions, but explosives devices. And a significant amount of that burning at once with pops from the fireworks mortars. I don't mean military mortars. I mean firework mortars and rocket pops. Fireworks are very common in the Middle East because they're often used as part of religious ceremonies. So, like, almost daily. So anyway, each stockpile of fireworks goes off. There's enough heat there to get the ANFO going. And I don't mean to make it blow up. I mean, not to make it explode, but to make a conflagration begin. So it's burning probably at that point already. So there's a tremendous amount of heat available. It is possible that some of the fireworks fire here burns quickly enough to actually cause enough gas pressure on the ANFO to get it to go, just because of the scale, the absolute scale and heat of the fireworks fire that was next to it. So that's not unrealistic either. It would be possible to have a scenario where you have a tremendous amount of pressure introduced just because of the circumstance, the scale that was at. In fact, 27,000 tons, right, was stored there. If the bottom of the stack started burning, there may already be enough pressure there to actually trigger a reaction, just because the compression, as it's burning, if it starts burning at the bottom, it's got nowhere to go. There's gases trying to escape. That could build up enough pressure by itself to set the whole thing off. There is, suspicion that there was a nuclear strike, and everyone, anyone that believes that immediately goes, oh, Israel did it because it must be the damn Jews, which is silly for a number of reasons. But one of the primary silly things about even saying that is this was a ground burst. It was not an aerial burst. Any ground detonation of a nuclear device will leave behind residues that are easy to identify. They're not just easy to identify with, like, scientific instruments. They leave behind trinitite. They burn and melt silicon and concrete and sand. You will get trinitite left over from that. And if you don't know what trinitite is, go look it up. It's this green, sometimes red. It's an amalgamated glass that's left over from any ground detonation of a nuclear device. That would be already readily visible. There's people crawling all over the site right now. It's not just radiation that you'd find. You'd find this stuff too. So you could walk through a nuclear detonation site without feeling the radiation yourself, unless you hang around there for a really long time or breathe in a bunch of fallout. But the trinitite will be readily evident in the area, and there's plenty of well-educated Lebanese in Beirut who would know exactly what that is if they saw it, for one. Second, there's investigators all over the place, and they know exactly what they're looking for. So that has not been found, has not been a big breaking story, despite people walking around with their cell phones, putting up Facebook and YouTube videos about the site right now. There's no way this is a nuclear blast. Another point is looking at the crater itself. There's aerial photos of the crater. We've got before and after pictures of the site. We see exactly what we would expect to see from a low RE factor, a slow burning, pushing type explosive. We don't see the fractures on the ground that you'd see from like a nuclear blast or the radial disruptions that you'd see from something that cracks the ground, shocks it at once. What we see instead is a pushed out crater where the warehouse floor is down into the sand now. It's down below sea level. Around the sides we have that smooth, pushed out, all that land material there, all that was on the docks has been shoved out. And the surrounding factory areas, we don't have shattering action on buildings. We have shoving, like pushed out, roofs ripped off and blown away, not shocked. A shocked roof, the roof will tend to go down into the building. What we have is sort of a mighty wind throwing everything away. And that's more what we would expect to see from... It was the same thing with the cars that got tossed. They didn't get shocked, they got thrown. That's a different type of effect. So it looks like an ANFO explosion. It does not look like a nuclear bomb, does not look like C4, doesn't look like Comp B, Semtex, any of that stuff. It looks like ANFO. The story that we've got, going back to doc records 7 years ago, is that 2,700 tons of ANFO was seized from a ship that was, I believe, originally destined for Africa. The ANFO was intended for mining operations down there, which again, that makes perfect sense too. And it's stored there in this dumb place instead of being disposed of or reclaimed by the government and then used in domestic projects for whatever reason. It was never done. It's just stored there. So then fireworks being stored there. I've been to that area, but I don't know the details of what different warehouses are like earmarked for what type of storage. But if they've got what's supposed to be a safety rule, put all the dangerous stuff at the end on that dock out in the middle out there. That would make sense that they get a huge bunch of fireworks and that's where they're going to keep it temporarily. So all this does look like it could be just an accident. It's totally possible for it just to be an accident. One story I've heard is that somebody smoking set it off. Another story that I've heard is that a welder was welding on some, metal railing or something that was close to where the fireworks are stored, and that got them started. I've seen both types of accidents happen in the Middle East. I've seen lots of, since I was a kid, anybody who's been around welding has seen welding start a fire before. Just because metal conducts the heat so well. You're trying to fix a part of a car over here and the tire catches on fire. That type thing happens. And anyone who's been around that knows that that's a completely plausible explanation. Smoking is also a completely plausible explanation. You'd say, well, why would somebody smoke that close to fireworks? Well, they smoke everywhere. They don't really think about where they are. I've had tobacco ash flavored, stir fry because people are smoking while they're cooking and it's just going in and they don't care. I mean, you care when you eat later, but they don't care when they're making it. So that, you know, that all this is plausible. As for enemy action, it is also, you can't, I'm not ruling out enemy action. I'm just saying that it is entirely plausible that this could be an accident and purely an accident. If we look at enemy action, however, not a nuclear bomb, not an airstrike, not a missile, none of that fits this. An ANFO explosion due to a massive fire from fireworks next to it, that fits. If you're the enemy, let's say you're the Israelis. They have a space program. They don't need to nuke. They don't need to nuke Beirut. There's no motive to do that. That's silly. If you wanted to blow up Beirut, you would hire a 12-year-old with, a match to go set that off. All that an enemy needs to do to determine this is a good attack is have a motive, a target nearby, and just be aware that there's 2,700 tons of ANFO, more than you could ever hope to get together in a terrorist attack or any kind of espionage operation. It's already pre-positioned there. All you got to do is get it to go off. Now, you could go up and set up your own charge, your own kicker, just put it in there and, let it rip. Or you could set up the fireworks next to it if that's convenient or whatever. This is all convenience, and there's no reason to go to any extra effort. Since this is an accident waiting to happen, there's no reason to go to extra effort to do anything other than just make the accident happen now. So it very well could be enemy action, but it's not an external weapon being used. It's the set up stupid situation that port had already the port already set up this disaster to happen. All the enemy would have to do is come by and just go, boop, and make it go. Which brings it, so it could be enemy action, it could be an accident. We don't know yet. The next piece of it, though, is motive. Who would want to do this? Why would they do this? What got destroyed in that was significant? So far, the only thing that I have found, and I haven't been really focusing on this. This is why this is an assessment. I'm not doing an analysis. Analysis is where I hate that people forget what this is. The media doesn't have real analysts anyway. The government barely does these days too. Excuse me. An analysis is where I would take my assumptions, my facts, I'd separate them, and I would start rating them based on importance, and plugging them into the context of the world model that seems to be accurate as we know it at this point. Then we would rate those assumptions and facts on importance, and we'd rate each one in isolation. At the end of that, we wind up getting a confidence rating. There's a little bit more to it, but at the end of this, there's a confidence rating that we get, and it's not perfect, but the purpose of doing an analysis like that is to expose the bias that's inherent in your own assessment, so that you can scrub out your emotions. Like maybe you really don't like the whatevers, the Assyrian Empire. Let's say we're doing analysis a couple thousand years ago, and we really hate the Assyrian Empire. We really hate it, and we want to blame them for something so bad, deep in our heart, that we just assume everything is their fault. And from that assumption, we just move forward and create this whole explanation that doesn't make any sense at all. Well, that bias, the Assyrians, it's always their fault. You want to remove that. You got to scrub that emotion out of your assessment. And analysis is how you do that. You start rating your facts and rating your assumptions, and by the end of the process, you're like, wow, this doesn't make any sense at all. They've got no motive to do this. It's even against their interests to try to do this. There's no following play that makes any sense for them to have done this. So that's a step that people that are coming up with these conspiracies left and right, especially the Israeli conspiracy theory, doesn't make any sense at all. And there's a lot of things that are just factually false about some of these. Like one of them is, oh, well, the Rothschild Bank, like that's a thing. The Rothschild Bank is right next to this warehouse that blew up in Beirut. I've heard that. I've also heard that, the same day the pharmaceutical plant in China blew up, and guess what's next to that? The Bank of China, which is also not quite true. In addition, no banks in the area of either had anything more than a little bit of window damage. And they were branched, but they're not the location of the smoky room where the old guys with cigars make decisions about how they're going to rule the world. That's not anywhere close to Beirut, and it's also not in that part of China where that pharmaceutical factory blew up yesterday. So that's just like crazy. They're trying so hard to find reasons this could possibly be part of the the global financiers conspiracy thing, and none of that fits. If you do an analysis on your assumptions and your facts, if you analyze your assessment, you discover that quickly, and it crushes your heart quite a few times. You're like, man, I really wish this was true, but it turns out it's not. And you got to let that go and move on, because reality is always going to have something more crazy than anything you'd come up with yourself. Will wind up being the truth quite a lot of the time when you look at big events. So anyway, motive. If we look at motive, and again, I'm giving an assessment myself here, but I'm going to backstop that a little bit with saying I've been doing analysis in the Middle East and Asia and quite a few places for over a decade, and my model of how the world kind of fits together is a little bit more refined than somebody that just watched CNN for 5 minutes, maybe. That's an argument from authority, but just hear my assessment and understand that every assessment is ongoing. There's no end to assessments. There's no end to modeling the world and figuring out how it works. There's something to be refined everywhere. But from my current understanding of the shape of the Middle East and the way things work and what motivates action there at the moment, Lebanon was hurt by this, Israel was hurt by this, and Syria was hurt by this. The reason I say that is the most significant thing I have found about that particular detonation site where the explosion was is that the tall building right next to it in the videos is Lebanon's strategic grain reserve. And it was just blown to crap. I imagine they probably lost the whole thing. Those grain silos are super hard to blow up too. If you've ever done demo work, which that used to be one of my jobs, or that's a job I have had in the past, grain silos are super hard to blow up. And that one's like done. I mean, even the outer wall has been breached on most of it, which is just unbelievable. And grain silos are already kind of dangerous when they're full. So anyway, that grain silo is done. This may very well be a loss of Lebanon's strategic 3-month grain reserve. I'm not sure if they've got another backup somewhere or what, but it looks like that was it. And this is extremely bad timing for them, because the world is just about to, we have a looming, I hate that word looming. We have a coming food shortage that will manifest globally. It's not going to hit the U.S. so much and Europe so much, but a lot of other places are going to be struggling with regard to food. And normally the surpluses of the first world, feed the third. Whenever they go into land redistribution mode, and the sweet story of, land reclamation, all that stuff, kind of infects people to the point that they wind up starving themselves. Like South Africa right now, they're killing off all the farmers because they're white. The problem is they're the ones that know how to farm. Well, it didn't work out very well in Zimbabwe. It didn't work out very well anywhere that they've done that. It always results in famine in the end. And there's been some issues with that going on recently in Africa. They've also lost some crops recently. China's gone through this is the second year they've had armyworm problems. It's big this year. Armyworm problems, massive floods, lost most of their crops. Yangtze can't be used for navigation at the moment. Lots of problems. It's not clear that we can actually get wheat. The Central Asian wheat may not be mobile this year. Quadrillions of calories have been, of staple foods have been just rotted, unable to ship because of the virus hysteria that's gripped everybody. So the first segment of the growing season in the U.S. was pretty much just flat, gone. Meat shortages in the U.S., but they can sell higher overseas. Same thing in New Zealand. They produce tons of meat, but selling it overseas is cheaper than trying to sell it locally because of regulatory reasons. So there's all these weird, like, unbalanced situations that are exacerbated tremendously by both a combination of natural disasters and pests, and on top of that, the virus panic has just like it's just really thrown things into a bad spot. So we have a coming food shortage that's gonna affect everyone to some degree. And at the same, like, just a few months before this, Beirut's strategic grain reserve gets blown up completely. Who would that benefit? What's the motive? I don't know. Unless they're trying to, I say they. Got to be careful when you say they, because it could mean anybody. An attacker that is trying to potentially sow confusion, set up a humanitarian crisis, like create a humanitarian crisis in a specific spot so they can prepare a narrative and prepare a story to blame somebody. It's possible, but it is definitely against the interest of Israel to have its northern neighbor and sometime ally get hit like that, because Israel can't feed them. It's against, so they can't do a dependency play there very easily. That's not part of it. And when you're talking to Beirut, you're really talking to Damascus half the time anyway, or Tehran. So it's not obvious. There's no clear leverage there. Even if you want to believe that the Israelis would do something like that, there's just no leverage there. It doesn't fit. Syria, same thing. No leverage there. There's nothing good to come from that for Damascus. Damascus is going to have the same issue themselves. They can't feed all of Lebanon either, so they can't do a dependency play that direction also. ISIS or Islamic elements that are trying to sow chaos, it's possible, but it seems very unlikely. The reason it seems unlikely is this is over 24 hours ago, and there's no claim of responsibility. Nobody is saying there's no credible claim anyway. We've got nothing. No leading indicator that they're going to go back and say, see, we said this 2 days ago, and now it happened, and it's your fault, and we're claiming responsibility. There's none of that. So it's like, this shocked everybody. This surprised the normal bad guys you'd look at. They're wide-eyed too, like, oh my goodness. Nobody expected this. It doesn't fit Russia, doesn't fit Iran, doesn't fit Iraq, Jordan. Nobody in the region benefited from this, at least not directly. And unless there's a few things we can look for coming up, unless we find a definite fingerprint that indicates a specific actor. That's one thing. Another thing is if we find anything about the blast site that makes for a target, that changes the story in some way. Well, what got blown up there was this really important thing for X. Then we can go look at who's connected to X. But what we see mostly is mid-sized manufacturers, some medical facilities, shipping, storage. I mean, most of this that's all regional shipping right there. There's not one group that got hurt by this. It kind of flattened the whole thing out, and that was bad. And nobody has a reason to squish Lebanon in that way. And everybody needs that port to stay open. It doesn't really... The good guys and the bad guys use that area. So there just isn't a single motivating factor that makes sense for this. So, to me, initial assessment looks like an accident. Trump said that it's an attack. Well, I don't know. He's got a very good track record with saying things that sound like, how could you know that? And then he's right. Sometimes he's wrong, though. So I don't know. To me, it looks like an accident. we'll find out later. There's nothing else to say except time will tell. But there is no smoking gun on this. There is no fingerprint that says that's the guy. Not yet. So something may come out soon. But be careful to filter through all the conspiracy nonsense that comes out with, parentheses around people's names and, Putin did everything, or, this guy's owned by that guy and so blah, 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 or, the global bankers, or that's where they make the adrenochrome. You got to just be careful about people manipulating your inner associations. Everything I just said may have a kernel of truth to it somewhere, but none of it seems to fit here. So, take that for what it is. But this is pretty much the talk I would give. A little bit more rambling. I would structure it first. But this is pretty much what I would tell anybody who asks me about this event at the moment, knowing what I know right now. I'm not on contract. I'm not going to be paid probably to look into this. So I won't. And it is what it is. We will find out from somebody. It's just a horrible accident, it looks like. And horrible things are horrible. So, if you're religiously inclined, keep those people in your prayers. Because a whole lot of people got messed up. And a lot of people's homes, and there's some nice areas right near there that just got, residential areas that got really messed up from that. So there's a lot of people in a bad way who've got no horse in this race. They're just like living their life, doing their thing, and boom, this happened to them. That sucks. So world's a rough place. Take care of your family. That's all I've got to say about this, and we'll see how the editing goes.